Artificial intelligence is evolving and fast. Can we keep up? Can we stay in control? And how concerned should we be if we can't? On the one hand, advances in AI promise to improve healthcare and boost our economy. On the other, there's fears it could threaten our democracy, our very existence, if it falls into the wrong hands. AI is already changing the way we live and work at a rapid pace, and it falls ultimately on the Prime Minister to decide how we should deploy it in the UK. What are the risks and what are the rewards? I asked the Prime Minister about this on a recent trip to Washington.
I'm not going to get into this business of scaremongering people, because I think what people will say, well, hang on, there's a new technology, which we don't fully know yet what it's capable of doing. The creators themselves have talked about risks on a scale on parallel with nuclear war and pandemics, and when people hear that, they'll rightly be worried about that. No, but that's why I've actually been bringing the companies together to talk about guardrails to put in place to prevent those kind of things from happening, and that's why I think it's important that we do that.
So very, very important, and I think the public will want to hear this. So what you're saying is, if it's not regulated properly, it could be on the scale of equivalent to nuclear risk. It could kill humans. We have to monitor it, have to regulate
I think it's absolutely right that we put guardrails in place, because the technology is enormously powerful.
It's that extreme power that's got people worried, but should we be? I'm here at the University of Southampton to talk to Professor Dame Wendy Hall. She is a leading computer scientist in this country and the AI skills champion for the UK. So no one better placed to talk about this technology and how it's going to affect our future. Dame Wendy, thanks for joining us on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
And inviting us down to
We're also excited you've come to Southampton.
I'm delighted to be here. Now, you've had an extraordinary career as one of the world's leading computer scientists, but you don't look to me like a classic computer geek, if I may say. How difficult was it for you to make it in what has always been a very male-dominated world?
I taught maths for engineers at Oxford Brookes, Oxford Poly as was, and then I came back to Southampton to teach maths at a teacher training college. I'm the head of the maths department. The personal computers were coming out at the time, and he said, "Oh, you're a mathematician, you can do computing. We need to do a basic, that's the basic programming language course." So I took a Commodore PET home one summer and taught myself the basic programming language. I've never been a great programmer, but I began to see the magic, and the magic was being able to put photos, videos, text on a computer. Yeah, but against all the odds, I managed to build a group up around doing this type of work. And that's why I'm considered a pioneer of multimedia and hypermedia. Then I started to see this stuff about how you make links between documents on computers. It's called hypermedia. And I met Tim Berners-Lee at a conference. He was talking about the web. He hadn't called it that then. I was talking about the system we built here, the hypermedia system we built here. And we've, been working together on and off ever since. But I got this idea that if you could actually get information on a device, in those days it was a computer, and be able to click on a piece of information and go somewhere else, anywhere else in the world, to download that information onto your machine, now your phone, how exciting that would be.
What I'd like to do today is get you to explain to people in a way I couldn't possibly ever begin to what artificial intelligence is in this next frontier. But it really excites you. In the 40 years you've been doing all of this, does it scare you as well?
No. Never.
We'll
come on to this. There are threats from AI. But there was, and actually, there were threats from what we were doing on the internet with the World Wide Web. We didn't realise at the time. You just assumed people were going to do good things with it. So when we moved into the 2000s and the web became interactive, so you could write to it without having to learn a programming language. And social media started to arrive. We really didn't have any idea what bad things people would do with it. Or, everything that's bad about society is writ large on the internet. It happened so fast. And it's somehow that people they lose their moral compass in a way. You know, they seem to feel they can do something in social media they wouldn't do in normal
real
life. No.
Can you explain to us what we mean by the term artificial intelligence?
Well, it's changed a lot since it was invented in the 60s. The UK likes to claim the invention of artificial intelligence through Alan Turing and his paper in the 50s, Can Machines Think? And his argument that, you know, you want to his Turing tests, can you tell the difference between a machine asking you questions and people asking you questions or answering your questions? Artificial intelligence really was born out of the world of philosophy. Turing was philosophizing, could we actually create using software and maybe hardware as well, specialist hardware, machines that could outthink humans or at least be as intelligent as we are. And that was the beginning of that field. Then, as machines became more powerful, the definition of the word subtly changed. It wasn't really that we were trying to replicate the human brain, or even to think about, although there are some experiments to do that, or even to think about what intelligence means, because that's what the philosophers were thinking about in the first place. It was more about how can we build systems that can think for themselves, right? And given an objective, actually think their way through it. So we developed expert systems, and along the way, people like Jeff Hinton, who was originally at the University of Edinburgh, he was developing this idea of we could maybe do that using what we call neural networks, which is really mimicking how the neurons in the brain talk to each other. Now, with neural networks, they're trying to think of how to mimic how, not to build a human brain, but how those networks fire off of each other to create complicated networks out of which information and knowledge emerges.
Just on the neural networks, so people can understand, I think, the concept of how you program a computer to do something or write in code to mimic human intelligence. But then these neural networks, something new's emerging, isn't it? That computers seem to be able to learn and develop independently from being programmed. Is that where it's going?
That's where it's going, and that's what people are frightened of.
It's hard to understand.
It is, because...
Can you explain that? Because I find that hard to understand.
Actually, just think of it like how a child learns. It's actually not much different to that, all right? Children, I mean, our human brains are still far better and far more sophisticated than anything we can build today. But when you think about how a child learns, you can't understand what pattern it is. People study forever how children pick up on things when they're little, and as they get bigger, how they pick up on language and how they pick up on your face. That is essentially how these machines are working.
So why, in the broadest sense, Dame Wendy, would you say AI can help us?
Because the sort of AI we're using at the moment, machine learning, generative AI, it's trained on huge amounts of data and can do that in a way that we can't do. So in medicine, when it's looking at scans, cancer scans or eye scans, it can do many, many, many hundreds and be much more accurate than a human being. Okay. Doesn't mean that the radiologists who do those scans today will lose their jobs. We still need radiologists. They can do other things. But what AI will do, I think, is some of the menial stuff. You know, just looking time after time at images more accurately and faster, because it can absorb so much data.
What about better government? Because do you think decision makers eventually will be able to draw on the wisdom of these hugely intelligent machines to make better decisions as well? Do you think AI could improve our politicians?
I think so. I mean, I can say this, can't I? I mean, politicians often talk about things they don't know anything about. And, and partly that's because they're given a lot of stuff to read and they don't have time to assimilate it. And one thing you can do with the generative AI is give it a file and ask it to summarize it for you. And you can talk to it about what are the most important things in that file, and it'll give you that analysis.
So it helps you process information so that you can be more efficient?
Absolutely, Yeah.
I think I need a bit of that.
And when you think about what we're going to have is that sort of AI linked to a search engine like Google or Bing. And then you'll be able to ask questions to get the facts back and some analysis, and it'll reply in a natural language. That's why it feels so intelligent.
I mean, I read a very interesting essay this week that said AI could be the most important and best thing that's ever happened to us, that civilization has ever created. This essay argued that it was on par with breakthroughs like electricity and microchips. Do you see it like that, Wendy?
I do. But we must keep it under control.
How profound is it? I mean, is it the most transformational thing civilization will see in...
Ever? Because it might be the end of us.
Ever? No, but I'm just trying to get it into my head, like how profound a moment this could be for civilization.
We're now seeing how we can use it to create better lives for people, and I think also equal playing fields too, if we get it right, for the developing countries as well as developed countries. I think that's so important. It will give us the power to do all sorts of things that we haven't even dreamt of. It will create new jobs that we have no idea yet what they're going to be.
Is it the last thing humans will ever invent?
Well,
because then AI will just the machines will invent stuff
that's
for us
the big,
after that.
There are people who say exactly that, because if the machines take over, then they don't need us, right? So
they
what
could
is
be
the point?
cleverer than us.
Well, they don't even have to actually be cleverer than us to become our masters, because if they can do things better than us, that doesn't mean they have to have that much of an understanding of what they're doing. So it's all about managing, taming the tiger that we've created. And that's why regulation is so important.
What about the risk of bad actors in this? And what I mean is when, you know, that the Prime Minister described it to me last week as enormously powerful technology that we are creating. What if that goes into the hands of someone who wants to do harm, be that Putin, President Xi, Kim Jong-un of North Korea? How could bad actors use it against us?
Well, in the short term, like next year, we will see a growth in disinformation, the deep fakes of this world, because AI makes it very easy to do that. You can just get the tools off the internet, and it's getting harder and harder to detect that a video or a photo or a piece of text has been faked. I see this as something we've got two major elections coming up next year. The US, UK, and the EU have got elections as well. I see this as a threat to democracy, in the sense that we've got to help people understand where they're getting the messages from. We have to understand how to check our sources. We all have to understand that and not just believe everything because it's appeared on the internet.
But next year's very soon.
I know.
So you're
So
saying
I think that's more important than worrying about an existential threat in 100 years' time. But I'm not saying the existential threat isn't there. It is very unlikely at the moment, I think, or let's say it's unlikely at the moment, but it's a possibility. And so we have to prepare for the fact that we're keeping the AI under our control so that we don't become the slaves to that master, and which is where the regulation comes in.
What do governments need to do between now and a general election, maybe in October, and then a US election in November? What do they do between here and now and then to try and deal with this?
We are in a good place to think about it. And if it were me, if I was Prime Minister, the global summit in the autumn would be all about this.
Right. Okay.
Because you've already got the AI task force is set up. We've got money coming out, like the money we've got here at Southampton, to look at trustworthy, reliable, responsible and trustworthy AI. There's a lot of money being announced today. The Prime Minister announced 100 million. There's money coming out And what we need is people to quite quickly pull together the technology that's used to detect fakes and to ensure that something's coming from a trusted source. Okay. And I think, I have to say, as ever, journalists and newspapers have a big responsibility here. I know that all creditable journalists will check their sources, and that has to be something that we make front and central. And I would say, let's discuss that in the autumn. It's something really real and tangible, and get task forces going that are looking at the technology to help with that. Really, think of it like, I want to say a war scenario. I think we should think of it as a clear and present danger. And at the same time, set in motion the global discussions about how we regulate AI in the future.
You talked about existential threat. This is about AI technology developing more rapidly than expected, to the point where that technology becomes more intelligent than humans. What would be the significance of that moment, Wendy, if and when that happens? Well,
it used to be called the Singularity. This has been talked about for a long time. It's not something that's just emerged. It's, academics, philosophers, people in industry have been talking about this for a long time. And there's a university called the Singularity in America. We think about what would happen if machines overtook human beings in terms of intelligence. And as I said before, actually, see, none of the stuff we've got today has any sentience. It doesn't know what it's doing, right? It does what it's programmed to do, and then because of these huge networks, it generates information in ways we can't unravel and find out how it did it. So machines don't have to be more intelligent than us or know more than us to be able to generate themselves. And that's, I think, the real. If the machines can spawn other machines that are that are more intelligent, then we lose control of what's going on. And you remember 2001 with Hal saying, "Oh, I can't do that, Dave," right? And you couldn't turn Hal off because Hal's driving the ship. Right, we've got this. Can we turn it off? Could we stop it if it was a real imminent danger?
Could we stop it? Can we turn it off? Can we unplug it? You can't, can you?
No, you can't exactly like that. But you could do things to block it, and that's another discussion that we need to have. Because you'd have to turn the internet off. You'd probably have to turn the electricity supply off.
But Wendy, does it? We started at the beginning of this how excited you were about technology and of all the developments. Yeah. Does it frighten you, the idea that machines become out of human control?
Yes, of course it does. I couldn't say it doesn't. We aren't anywhere near that. Right? The headline that said we've got 2 years to save the world was very misleading, and the quote was taken out of context. But I do believe we're at a point where we can see how things could get out of control in generations down the line. So I believe firmly, and I'm totally with the government on this, I'm glad we're taking a lead, that we need to think about global regulation in the area of AI in the same way as we think about climate science, and we think about nuclear threats, and we think about chemical, biological warfare. It is at that level that we have to discuss it.
But just going back to Matt Clifford, because you just mentioned him in your answer there, because he's the PM's advisor at the moment on AI, and I listened to that interview, and it was, of course, very nuanced, but he did say in it that the moment when computers could become more intelligent than humans could come within 2 years, and he said it could kill many humans. What did you make of that?
I thought that was overreaction. I don't believe we are at that stage. I think we could see how it could happen. Right? I mean, it's...
How could it kill humans, though?
By developing a drug that kills us all. Then someone persuades us all to take it. I mean, we have huge regulation on the pharmaceutical industry for this very reason, right? And we all know the scare stories, the thalidomides and all the other stories where drugs have got through. I mean, we're still discussing the COVID vaccines in terms of how they were tested. That is very regulated, that industry, and so AI needs to be probably as regulated as that, and the two come together because, AI technologies, AI machines can develop a new drug, and in the wrong hands it could be sold as the great cure for such and such. You could think of scarce scenarios, but we aren't at that stage yet.
Because Geoffrey Hinton, who you talked about earlier, who's the godfather, the godfather of AI, develops it from infancy, he said recently he thought it was running out of control. He said he quit Google, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
He said he no longer wanted to be involved in the work, and he said, I've got the quote here, Wendy, he said, the idea this stuff could actually get smarter than people, a few people believe that, but most people thought it was way off, and I thought it was way off. I thought it was 30 to 50 years or even longer away. Obviously, I no longer think that. So how fast do you think we could cross that Rubicon? You don't think it's 2 years, but...
I'm not gonna come up with a name. That's what happened to Matt Clifford, a number.
Yeah.
I think that people like Geoffrey Hinton, I think having said, well, I've invented this and now I'm running away because it's all coming. Come on, we need your brain to help us tackle it, to make sure. I believe that if we get the regulation right, we can keep it under control.
Are you disappointed that he kind of has
I'm
disavowed
disappointed in the way he did it. Yeah, because. Okay. So he's claiming he was part of the development of this, and now he's walking away when actually we probably need him most.
We're hosting the first global conference about how we might regulate AI, and this is the Google DeepMind CEO Demis Hassabis put out a statement saying mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war. When I asked the PM about that and about regulation and he didn't deny that. He sort of acknowledged this existential risk. But you were saying that shouldn't be the priority now.
Well, I think I do believe, but it is a huge priority. Don't get me wrong. It is a huge priority. We should start on that path now. I think we have short-term risks that we really need to think about for next year. We need to start talking about global regulation. You don't do that in a short period of time. The other thing, which we sort of touched on briefly earlier, I don't believe you can have this global discussion without people like the Chinese and, well, maybe the Russians, that's a different issue, but definitely the Chinese. The Chinese have this technology already. Don't think that they don't.
Yeah.
Right? They have it, and maybe even better than ours. It could be more developed than ours. So I firmly believe we've got to have them at the table, not necessarily at this autumn meeting, but the last thing, I really don't think we should be setting up a situation where we have a meeting about something that's just as important to them as it is to us. They have different cultural values, but they're just as worried about the existential threat from AI as we are, right? They're just as worried about ethics in AI as we are. And we can't have a global agreement that only a third of the world is signed up to, right?
Do you think it would be beneficial to slow down the progress, to allow the systems, if you like, the regulatory systems to catch up with the technology?
I think it will slow down itself a bit. There's no business model for this yet. These companies have got to make money. And also, it takes a huge amount of money and compute power to analyse the whole of the internet. They did it in 21. GPT-4 was trained on the internet as it was in 2021. It is phenomenal. It is phenomenally expensive to do that. Unlike Google and Microsoft Bing that trawl the internet all the time to get the information they want for the link for the search engine. You can't do that with this generative AI. So I personally think it's going to slow itself down for a while.
Okay. So which side of the line do you stand? That AI will save us or AI will be our end?
Save us.
will save us. And Wendy, I've got one final thing I wanted to talk about, other frontiers, which is, this is also fascinating. Elon Musk's company Neuralink hopes to insert microchips into people's skulls to treat conditions. And the chips have been tested on monkeys, and they're designed to interpret signals produced in the brain and relay the information around your body via Bluetooth. Apparently a test on humans has been approved in the US. What's your take? Is that hopeful technology?
Well, again, you see, this for people with disabilities,
incredible,
this is fantastic.
right?
But if we think generative AI is potentially an existential threat, just imagine a world where computers can read your brainwaves. That's what this is about.
What, they could control me to do things I might not want to do?
They can certainly know what you're thinking. Now, at the moment, the messages are going one way, right? The machines are reading the brainwaves. Whether they could then insert something into the brainwave, which there have been many science fiction films about. Memento's one. So that, when people ask me what's the next generation of AI we should be thinking about, that's the one I always pick, because I've seen it in the research labs for years now.
But there was a case, wasn't there, where a man from the Netherlands had been paralysed.
Yeah.
And for him, that is
it's amazing.
It's a miracle.
So this is why I say, save us.
Yeah.
But we need, it's another form of, completely different form of AI.
Okay.
But when you bring that, but we have to be able to regulate that as well.
So the advantage is a paralysed person can walk again, which is for that individual an absolute
or someone
miracle.
without sight
can see again, or hear again.
Speak, or not have to. Yeah,
that's wonderful.
It's amazing.
But the risk is that the computer then controls your brain,
or at least knows exactly what you're thinking, and you think.
And then what manipulates you?
Yeah,
turns us into an army of zombies.
At the moment, as I said, it's going. The computers are reading the brainwaves, reading them. They can't write to them yet.
What could it do if it could read your brain?
Well, it can understand what you're thinking, so outthink you in that sense. Also you could. Would you want other people to be reading your brain? Because if your computer can read it,
no,
then
I definitely would not.
You see, if your computer can read it, then other people can get from the computer what you're thinking. So you're into a world where, I find that world a bit scary, I have to say. I want to make sure that we really understand what we're doing with that technology. So I would like to think that this is a new technology that hasn't yet emerged into the mainstream, but it's definitely coming. So I would, in a way, think ahead of the current game. So rather than thinking too much about how we regulate generative AI, because that's not intelligence at all, in any sense, really, as things stand, I would think much more about how would you regulate an industry with you've got machines reading brainwaves? Because that's not just software, that's cyber-physical. So it's another layer of regulation in there.
Do you think that has more risk than benefit then?
No. Again, the benefits are huge, but it's all about how we learn to work with the machines.
You've done this for 4 decades. You've been.
Yeah.
Is this the most exciting, transformative time for technology in your lifetime? And that blows my mind, even asking that question, when I think about, being at university, I didn't even have a computer or a mobile phone, to where we are now. But is it the most?
Well, I actually had my mind blown by the internet and the web. Don't forget, I was right at the cutting edge of that. Just think what life was like without that.
It's quite peaceful, to be honest.
All right.
Thank you so much for talking to us about it, and it was extremely interesting, and I think that people will have learnt a lot. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming down and for taking the time.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Wendy. Well, I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with Dame Wendy Hall. Plenty of food for thought in that. And if you scan the QR code on your screen right now, you can listen to the Beth Rigby Interviews podcast. Each week I take a look at the highlights of my interviews, and there are some extra bits and pieces in there too. That'll be on the Sky News app or wherever you get your podcasts. Well, that's all for this week's show from the University of Southampton. Thanks so much for joining us.